Albert Einstein is noted as saying, "It is appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity." And in today's world, many people might agree with this sentiment. Most recently, technology has become a vital part of our existence. Right now, I can likely ask all of you to reach into your pocket or your bag or your purse and reach in and find a technology device. Maybe a cell phone, a laptop, a pad or a tablet, an iPad, maybe even a computerized watch. And likely, I can ask you to grab 2 or 3 of those right now. The list of how we use technology is endless. Equally as endless is the list of ways in which our lives have been aided through the use of technology. For example, just today, I've used my cell phone to wake up, using it to silence notifications I didn't want so that I could sleep soundly. I have used it to order my coffee on the way to class so that I could bypass the line and get here on time. I've responded to various communications, I've connected across social medias, and I've checked my bank account. All at the touch of a button on a device that rests nicely in the palm of my hand. And all of these things are convenient and helpful and easy. Yet, as we get further into this digital age, there have become questions as to the impact of all of this technology, especially from parents and educators whose main charge is teenagers. In fact, the number of people plagued by digital dependency and digital addiction has risen significantly in recent years, and today's teens are one of the highest demographics hit by this issue. And as educators, we can attest to this. Today's teens have grown up with technology at their fingertips, and they have seen the rate of penetration, or essentially, the amount of time for things to become mainstream, move so quickly that we cannot even begin to adapt. While it took 38 years for radio to reach penetration, it took only 20 for the traditional landline phone, and it has taken only 88 days for Google Plus to reach penetration. And as educators, keeping up with technology to help teens function in this technology-driven society is seemingly impossible. This generation, known as the Net Generation, or Gen Z, or in some cases iGen, after the oh-so-popular iPhone that so many of them have. And technology has inundated their lives from the very beginning. And with that, there are shifts in their priorities and their interests, their learning styles, their communication patterns, and most importantly, their overall sense of health and well-being. And for us to be effective as educators, we must prepare and adjust to this influx of technology. We must address the fact that the adolescent population has shown a dramatic increase in anxiety and depression. But to understand this issue, we must examine the landscape of technology in the lives of this generation, beginning with understanding their use of technology. Beginning in the mid-90s and extending through 2012, this generation has existed alongside technology, and advancements have been significant. While previous generations can recall things from the past like dial-up internet, flip phones, today's technology is marked by handheld devices, constant internet access, and advancements that seem as if they were out of sci-fi novels. Being immersed in the world of technology certainly defines this generation, as 95% of today's teens state that they have or have access to a smartphone, compared to just less than 75% from 4 years ago. Further, 45% of teens today admit to being constantly connected or always on their mobile device, linked into communication and/or web use, a percentage that has nearly doubled since the previous study. And while generations such as the millennials and Gen Xers are not strangers to technology and social media, the patterns have changed significantly. Today's youth prefer platforms that rely on visuals, such as Snapchat and Instagram, while previous generations had been defined by forms of communication like emails and social media platforms like Facebook. The reliance on more visual mediums has become standard, and the communication habits definitely show this. In fact, this generation is 2 times as likely to watch videos from their mobile device than any other generation, which is not surprising with Snapchat and FaceTime. With this emphasis on visuals and this shift in communication through the use of technology, the fear is that this generation is missing out on key experiences that define our humanity, much like Albert Einstein suggested in the opening quote. And we definitely see this permeating the education system. Further, is it possible that the mass saturation of visuals could be causing the developmental changes that result in the inability to socialize and connect, causing a greater susceptibility to anxiety and depression? This seems to be the question plaguing parents and educators and researchers. According to Dr. Lisa Stroman, a clinical psychologist who specializes in technology wellness, a recent study reviewed 32 different hospitals between 2008 and 2015 and found that hospital admission had more than doubled for the children aged 5 to age 17 for issues of self-harm, suicidal thinking, and suicidal actions. Further, the rate of the rate of suicide in Gen Z young people has increased at an alarming rate. Stroman notes that there is a 200% increase among young girls ages 10 to 14 and a 50% increase among boys the same age. While the emphasis on technology in today's world may not be the cause of the increase in hospital visits and suicide rates, there are some factors that seem to be connected. For one, as Generation Z children and adolescents are continually exposed to visuals, such as the videos they spend hours watching on YouTube, the functionality of their brains adapts. The brain adapts to this stimulation by becoming extremely adept at understanding complex visual imagery, causing this section of the brain to be more developed than other generations in the past who had fewer visual stimuli. Similarly, the brain of the Gen Z person has adapted to the constant notifications and change in stimuli. According to a neuropsychiatrist from Harvard Medical School, this constant change in attention, or task switch, is also known as acquired attention deficit disorder. Essentially, the typical Gen Z adolescent is unable to focus for more than 6 seconds, a change in brain functioning that has occurred due to the constant exposure of information being delivered in quick, short chunks. Between the approximately 3,000 texts that a Gen Z adolescent receives in a month and the 2 hours of YouTube that they watch in a day, their brains are unable to get a rest. As Dr. Susie Cox recognizes, the brain is developing at a much slower rate than their counterparts from previous generations. This, coupled with puberty starting earlier, causes the Gen Z teen to go through adolescence for nearly 2 decades, which we can all attest to is no fun. As a part of the typical development process, adolescence is a time of learning identity, finding a place in the world, and establishing healthy boundaries. Yet the Gen Z brain struggles to do this because of the adaptations occurring within the brain. This impacts decision-making and impulse control, causing the adolescent to struggle making motor control, cognition, and motivation. Beyond struggles in focus and emotional regulation, the Gen Z adolescent lives in a world where their lives are under strict examination, thanks to the constant use of technology. As Dr. Susie Cox explains, during the adolescent experience, it is natural for teens to feel as though there is an imaginary audience. Yet in today's world, there is quite literally an audience watching them. From sharing photos and videos and messages on various forms of social media to Find My Friends and life tracking apps, today's teens are much more visible than in previous generations, and so are their mistakes and flaws. This constant glimpse into the lives is so significant that many teens actually create multiple accounts. One that is shared and scripted for the public audience, and one that is private and gives a more real glimpse into their lives. By sharing information via technology and social media, the teen has control over what he or she shares and who is able to view that information, maintaining a distance between the teen and the audience. In fact, according to one study, the number of teens who get together with their friends on a regular, everyday basis has dropped 40% from 2000 to 2015. And And this is where the crux of the issue truly comes to life for educators. Between various changes in the brain function and the social distance maintained, the teens are living in a constant state of aloneness. This isolation creates a greater level of stress for the Gen Z spirit and thus correlates with the rates of anxiety and depression being noted from these various studies. For example, according to the study funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, teens who spend more time than average on screen activities are more likely to be unhappy, especially compared to their counterparts who spend more time on non-screen activities. Further, adolescents who spend an above average amount of time with friends in person are 20% less likely to say that they are unhappy. So at the end of the day, as Einstein recognized, the use of technology may very well be hindering our humanity, as seen through the experiences of our teens. Yet it doesn't have to. It's easy to crucify technology as the problem, and in some ways, as discussed today, it may be responsible. Yet, as educators, we must know better and do better. We must take into account that technology is essential to function in today's world. We must take into account that technology can make our lives easier, inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. And most importantly, we must account for the fact that technology is unlikely to be erased from our lives. Which brings us to one final question. How can teens use technology responsibly? Simply recognizing that teen brains have adapted to technology is the first step. Now, as educators, we must adjust to this mode of processing. Yet, we must also provide a counter to this rapid burst style of processing by providing complex thinking experiences. We must provide students with opportunities to build empathy and social connections in real life, not just through their screens. Next, we must take a united front of this issue, working with parents and communities to teach our young people positive technology practices. According to Dr. Stroman, when students are educated on positive digital citizenship practices, they are able to make better choices regarding their technology use, as seen by a 50% reduction in technology-related incidents in schools where she has implemented these practices. Finally, educators must recognize that technology doesn't have to be the enemy. While there are dangers, there are other positives as well. Teens today are less likely to use alcohol and drugs than in previous generations, and the rate of teen pregnancy and sexual activity has also decreased. Further, there are a great deal of ways that technology can aid life and learning, especially within the classroom. By highlighting useful apps, such as various apps to counter the impact of anxiety and depression and teach mindfulness, we can move forward positively. We can use other apps to help them engage in learning, connecting with peers, but also connecting in real life. Beyond that, we must work to provide better curriculum and support within schools and society to counter the negative effects of technology use. In the journey toward keeping our humanity, it is necessary that we arm future generations with the awareness of the impact of technology. We must create ways for the next generation to engage in technology as a partner in their learning instead of a tool for entertainment. And most importantly, in a world where anxiety and depression have escalated quickly, we must provide the next generation with tools to help them foster deep, empathetic relationships. And there are my citations.
What were those statistics again, Danielle? 6 seconds, 200, was it minutes on YouTube a day?
2 hours on YouTube a day.
2 hours?
Attention, it's acquired attention deficit disorder that says that the average attention span is 6 seconds a day and that they receive 3,000 texts a month.
Per month.
That attention span is shorter than the average goldfish. The article on Time or Wired.
That's amazing.
My students
They don't realize the things they call
Well, you hear that, and then you hear some of the mental things with the brain. I mean, it's just, there's no surprise here.
I know, I feel like I should have gone right after Gentry.
There's a lot of connections.
A lot of it.
I was like, ooh, we should collaborate.
I wonder if next time we sign up for these, we shouldn't try to tie them together a little bit to, if there's a flow to them.
I don't know, I kind of like them spread out, and you get like the impact again, like.
Right.
You thought you were done listening to this, you're wrong. It's actually the base again.
That is true.